Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. The fentanyl crisis continues to take a heartbreaking toll across the country, with more than 73,000 lives lost in 2022 alone. Here in New Jersey, Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia is leading a legislative push inspired by the tragic story of 15-year-old Weston Funder, who died after taking a fentanyl-laced pill. She's working closely with Weston's mother, Anne, to push for tougher penalties and stronger prevention efforts. We're going to talk about that in just a bit. First, though, we are joined by State Senator Vin Gopal to talk about two big issues in New Jersey: reforming how our schools are funded, especially when it comes to special education, and tackling the high cost of prescription drugs. Senator Gopal is here to talk and walk us through what he hopes to get done in the months ahead. Senator, good to see you. Thank you for taking the time.
Good to see you too.
Well, let's talk about the first piece of legislation. It's officially known as S3917. What it does is it proposes to change New Jersey's school funding laws, and it establishes a special education funding review task force. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Break it down into fundamentals ABC 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So New Jersey's school funding formula has not been modernized in a number of years, and having 600 individual school districts, has a challenge, especially when we have a lot of towns that have a K-8 and may also have a regional high school in the same town. So we know that, in some towns, it's anywhere from 50 to 70% of your property tax bill, sometimes even higher, is going to schools. And so what this bill does is really bring transparency around that process. So every parent, every taxpayer can really go onto the DOE website and understand how those dollars are being used, and exactly the transparency in the formula. It also make sure that no district is cut by a certain margin, roughly 3%, or gains by a certain margin. Some of the challenges we've had in past years is we've seen districts, famously like Toms River and Brick and some of the others have lost, millions and millions of dollars. This would put a cap on their losses, and also those that have gained a ton, it would put a cap on those gains. It also looks at the educational adequacy report and just make sure that everything is modernized as far as property values. And the fourth thing it does is looking at special education, which is the driving cost for a lot of New Jersey school districts.
Yeah, I mean, I think in covering so many budgets, there's so much frustration among those in the legislature. No one can be able, if you in the legislature can't get an answer on how some of the schools are funded, it's very frustrating as taxpayers, as a parent who has children in the schools. It's very frustrating. So how difficult is this, and why is this so difficult? Is it because we have more school districts than we actually do municipalities in the state? What are you finding as you're pushing this legislation through?
Yeah, it's 100%. I'll give you an example. I have a small school district in my legislative district that's down to 241 kids. They used to have about 500 kids. So funding is primarily driven on enrollment. And what's happening in a lot of these communities is enrollment is down. And that's why they're getting less money. And those that are gaining enrollment is gaining more money. Places like Toms River and Brick have lost a lot of students over time. Some of this is not at their fault, just because you have issues of senior communities moving in who don't have kids, or you have not as many ratables. There's a variety of issues, but the number one problem for these small school districts is post-COVID, inflation is through the roof. So if you have 241 kids in a school district and you need to negotiate on your healthcare contracts or your snow removal contracts or your waste management contracts, or hiring staff, or even just buying books and supplies, your buying power is not as good as somebody who has a district with 3,000 kids. And so I think part of what we're looking to do is eventually look towards mandating consolidation for those school districts that have under 500 kids, because it's not sustainable long term.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of South Hunterdon Regional School District, which was one of those areas. We had Stockton, we had Lambertville, we had West Amwell about 10, 15 years ago, regionalized. And, I guess the jury's still out, as far as, well, I don't know if the jury's still out. My property taxes didn't change necessarily. Are there other districts that you're looking at who have said, oh, they're doing it right, here's where we can save and really make a difference?
Yeah, I think that we need to regionalize a lot of these administrative services. I think the fact that we have 600 individual school districts that all have their own healthcare brokers and their attorneys and their own IT people and their own landscapers. I think we need to really start consolidating and merging some of these services. And I know that gets a lot of people up in arms, but the reality is, out of our 600 districts, probably at least 250 of them are very, very small districts, and they don't have the same buying power as other places do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about part of what this legislation would address is special education, and you are proposing a special education task force. Again, I have 3 children with special education. They're starting to have graduated, one still in the district, but it costs a tremendous amount of money. Our district can't support needs, so you have students going out, and that is a huge, huge cost. And there are very few special ed schools across the state that can oftentimes support this. And New Jersey has, extraordinarily high rates of children who have these special needs. So can you talk a little bit about this task force that you'd like to see developed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the state is responsible for extraordinary special education costs, any child that is going to cost the district more than $40,000 a year is an extraordinary special education cost. They may need an IEP, they may need specific services. We know every special education case is uniquely different. So it's not feasible for a school district that, again, I'm using the example of the one that has 241 kids, to have a full special education program there, because they might have it for one child, and how much is that going to cost? Transportation is a big cost. So the state needs to take over this completely. Former Senate President Sweeney really worked hard on trying to get extraordinary special education costs in the state budget. Unfortunately, in the last several years, it's gone down. And so I think that's something that the state needs to take over. That's what this task force is going to do. And, parents shouldn't have to move district by district, depending on the special ed services that are available for their child. It should be really either regionalized or by county, or we need to figure out a different approach. And I think that's what this task force is going to do.
Yeah, especially what's happening at the national level when it comes to the possible abolishment of the Department of Education. That does more oversight for special ed, but it has an impact. So I know a lot of families get very nervous, whether you have special ed or not, right? People, as much as you want to regionalize, they also enjoy having, well, I know the superintendent, well, I know this administrative assistant, I know these people. So there's familiarity with it, but with it comes a cost. You look at Florida, their school districts are done by county, which is, another extreme, which you have these super huge districts. So can you just talk a little bit about that and trying to take into account all of these competing and very valid concerns?
Yeah, I mean, look, we know we know that home rule is so important to so many folks here in New Jersey. But we're at a point where the cost is not really controllable anymore. And so when special education costs, especially a lawsuit that might happen, essentially has the ability to bankrupt the district. So I think the essence of all of these topics we're talking about, school funding formula, has to, and of course, I am a Democrat, Democratic senator and Democratic leadership who feels very confident that we have way too much government here and way too many government entities. I'm not just talking about school districts. We got 565 municipalities, hundreds of housing authorities, parking authorities. The amount of redundancy we have in services is out of control. And I believe strongly we can keep the quality of life and quality of services New Jersey has, the great education. We got to start regionalizing some of these administrative costs. Special ed's a big place in that.
And just one other on this before we move on to prescription drugs. How are your colleagues reacting to this? Because a lot of times Republicans will talk a little bit more about the consolidation. So you're talking about something that not all Democrats may agree with, or are they?
Yeah.
What's the consensus in Trenton?
It's really interestingly mixed here. Everyone loves the idea of permissive, but permissive doesn't work. No school board is gonna eliminate their own position. No superintendent is gonna eliminate. Everyone thinks they know what's best for their area. This was a key platform topic of Mayor Ras Baraka, who I would argue is the most liberal member who ran in the Democratic primary, called for mandatory consolidation for a very similar reason. Just because New Jersey, while we are the most diverse state in the union, we're also the most segregated state in the union. We have the most segregated school districts of anywhere in the country. I mean, I have communities like Deal and Asbury Park that neighbor each other that have that are completely segregated for communities. So by merging these school districts, we will not only just be better for taxpayers, we not only can try to make sure we have better buying power, but we can also help on a very important Democratic progressive issue, which is ending segregated school districts. So I do think it's a topic that over time is going to gain more support. I'm right now the only one on the bill right now on either party, but I'm trying to get more folks to understand that mandating is the way we can do it. We can do it in a humane way. We can do it in a 5 to 7 year plan. But I think we have to start taking those steps because the cost is going to keep going high, and we just can't afford it anymore.
We could probably spend hours and hours talking about this alone, and the cost of special education. I've seen it, experienced it personally ×3. But I do want to turn to another piece of legislation you're working on. It's the Equitable Drug Pricing and Patient Access Act. So can you talk a little bit about prescription drug costs here in New Jersey? Everything is going up. But can you just walk us through some of the main goals of this particular legislation and how you're trying to make medications more affordable and accessible?
Yeah, I mean, this was really driven by pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, which have really taken national attention recently. This is a bipartisan issue. Actually, Governor Huckabee of Arkansas, who is a very conservative Republican and former worked for Trump in the last administration, has signed into law some of the most aggressive PBM reform legislation, saying simply that a PBM can't own a pharmacy, and that's why CVS left the state. We're trying to do similar bills here. Fair reimbursements for all independent pharmacies, which have been, really suffering as a result of, these chains like Walgreens and Rite Aid and CVS. They are really trying to attempt to steer business to their own place. So this bill will ensure that pharmacies that a patient wants to choose can get the medication regardless of what it is. So it allows the patient to get the same medication at every pharmacy. When we have PBMs owning certain pharmacy, that really prevents patient access and patients going to the pharmacy of their choice. It also creates transparency in pricing because PBMs, by definition, are a middleman. They're not creating any of the medication, so they are a middleman that's very similar to the insurance companies right now. That choose. They give the doctors with 60 doctors a better reimbursement rate than they do with the mom and pop doctor. So it's the same concept here. So it's a bill that I hope will move in lame duck and is going to create fairness and allow patients to go to any pharmacy they want to get the same medication.
I mean, just final thoughts here, because New Jersey, we are the pharmaceutical capital of this country. Those PBMs are working against the pharmaceuticals as well. What type of support or perhaps hurdles might you be getting from the industry?
I mean, obviously, I don't think PBMs are overly happy with me right now. We have a number of anti-PBM legislation. My number one focus is transparency. Just show us what you're charging. Show the public what you're charging. I don't buy the argument of proprietary information because those markups could be insane, and they're getting it from even my conversations, even with the pharmaceutical companies that are making the medications. They're equally as frustrated with this system and with the situation. And I think it's a bipartisan issue. President Trump has been great on PBM reform, as have many of the leading Democrats.
All right, Senator Vin Gopal, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We'd love to have you back on again. We could have, dedicated the entire show to any one of these topics, but thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much.
Dawn Fantasia is behind a set of new bills aimed at fighting the fentanyl crisis here in New Jersey. It's inspired by the heartbreaking loss of 15-year-old Weston Funder. He died after taking a fentanyl-laced pill. Assemblywoman Fantasia joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
Absolutely. You've partnered with Ann Funder, whose son Weston died after taking a fentanyl-laced pill. So can you tell us a little bit about his story and her story that drove you to introduce this legislation?
Absolutely. Well, being a mom of three children myself, it's incredibly heartbreaking to hear this story because something like this can happen to anybody. Fentanyl doesn't discriminate. And Weston was 15 years old. They were in a new school district, and he accepted a fentanyl pill. And unbeknownst to him, it was laced with fentanyl from an acquaintance. And he never woke up after taking it. And it's a sad story that we see played out across the country. Fentanyl from I would say 2010 to 2020 has killed about 370,000 people. It's the number one killer of adults aged 18 to 49. And there needs to be a comprehensive look at what we can do to better combat this. And that was the impetus of creating this. I met Anne and I met some other advocates as well. And we spent many months going over the issues and what types of bills could possibly be proposed to help this crisis. I do know that in Arkansas, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has one of the strongest anti-fentanyl laws in the nation. So a lot of what we modeled came after that, and really with the goal of education, of working with the federal government, and then increasing penalties in the state of New Jersey to kind of do a multi-pronged approach to attack the issue.
Yeah, all right, so there are six pieces to the bill, or there are six bills. So can you talk a little bit, like one, for example, would expand human trafficking definitions to include recruiting kids into these drug schemes. So can you talk a little bit about that and the predatory nature of the fentanyl distribution targeting minors?
Absolutely. Well, that particular bill is actually named after Weston in his memory. It's Weston's Law. And it treats gang leaders and traffickers the same as human traffickers because there are much stiffer penalties. And what we would like to do is increase these penalties. Part of the prongs of these bills in this bill package is increasing penalties, even allowing juveniles to be charged as adults in the circumstance where a minor's life is taken. It also opens up the opportunity for life sentences for anyone who distributes fentanyl knowingly to a minor, and that results in a minor's death. So again, how this drug is coming to the United States is pretty clear. The vast majority of it is coming from overseas. It's coming from China. It's coming from India, and it's landing at our southern border, and it's trafficked across by the drug cartels. And what's happening that's particularly nefarious is these cartels are pressing fentanyl into other pills, look-alike pills that look like Xanax, look like Percocet, perhaps look like recreational drugs that people have used before or maybe have recognition of, and they take it thinking that's what it is. Also, there's predatory marketing that's happening. Sometimes these pills come in bright colors. They could be rainbow colored, different themes, fruity, cartoon characters, things like that. I mean, that's not anything new, is predatory marketing towards the youth, but we see these products being developed in ways to really lure children, adolescents, teenagers into using them. So again, that's another section of the bill would be to crack down harder on the predatory marketing. Now, I do have one piece of really good news. I said it was six bills. Well, now we can say it's down to five bills because on July 16th, President Trump did sign the Halt Fentanyl Act. And that was very, very important because what it did is fentanyl, what the cartels were doing is changing the formula and adding in something that would make it a different variant and knock it off the Schedule 1 class of drugs, thus lessening what the penalties would be. So now with the Halt Fentanyl Act passed both houses and signed by President Trump, now we have a circumstance where it is automatically classified. Any variant of fentanyl is classified as that Schedule 1 drug, and what accompanies that is the appropriate penalties.
Drug that kills. I'm going to start that question again. Schedule 1 drug. This is a drug that kills. Are you getting pushback saying, well, you know what, these penalties are way too harsh? And what if a kid has some and they think that they're just taking a little something to take the edge off? What do you say to those critics?
Well, these bills are not going after the actual end user at all. There's actually even an education component of it where it creates grant programs for mandatory education in the 8th grade across the state of New Jersey for children, so they're aware that this is happening. So none of this legislation actually targets the end user. What it targets is the distributor, and more importantly, the knowing distributor. And that's where those really stiff penalties come in, because to be honest, it was never about trying to target, children or a casual friend that unbeknownst to them hands it to a peer, not knowing, that's not the target of these bills. These bills are to actually target the guys and gals who are really looking to hurt our children. I mean, it really is. Fentanyl could be considered, and the last bill is a weapon of mass destruction. There's actually tests and studies that prove that this could actually be used and by the military to actually wipe out populations because of its toxicity. It is 50 times more potent than morphine. Now, keep in mind, fentanyl does have a valid use in medicine when it comes to severe pain management and whatnot, done under the strict guidance of a hospital and physicians. That is not what we're talking about here. This is absolute abuse, and you even have first responders going to scenes, and we have circumstances where they touch something that was containing fentanyl, and transdermally it's absorbed, and it has caused severe reactions in first responders. So I mean, we're not playing with something light here. This is something very, very heavy, and one of our bills really does urge Congress to look at this as a weapon of mass destruction.
Right, I mean, because you don't know who's doing what with it. It's not necessarily, like you said, it's an important distinction. One, that you're not going after the users, and also that there is a valid use for fentanyl, but what's happening on the street and how this is being changed and the formula messed around to sell and distribute to kids, that is an important distinction. And I wanted to follow up. You just mentioned something about a grant program specifically for 8th grade. For 8th graders. So can you talk about, that's a very proactive step to take. So what is it about 8th graders, this age group, and what kind of impact are you hoping that this program will have?
Well, 8th graders are on the cusp, right? We're talking 13, 14-year-old kids, and they're on the cusp of going to high school. They're on the cusp of going out into the workforce, maybe getting a part-time job. They're getting a little more freedom, at home to be able to be out a little bit later, maybe with their friends. And we think that that's a really good age to target children and explain the dangers to them. Again, I can't tell you how many times this happens across the country to children right in that age group. And also, when gangs tend to recruit kids, they tend to look at that 12 to 14 range where they try to target them. So by making it 8th grade, we felt that that was developmentally appropriate for the children to be able to retain and process the information and start to make a better decision, but also really try to target them as there might be these nefarious forces coming somewhere else that might have bad intentions for the children.
Assemblywoman, we're working with Weston's mom, Anne. She's called these fentanyl dealers predators, comparing them to murderers. They are. So can you talk about how your bills aim to hold those who target kids accountable? What other stories you might be hearing from other families? She's obviously not the only one. It's every parent's worst nightmare.
It's absolutely unbelievable when you think about, they now say 4 in 10 Americans know somebody who has been killed by fentanyl. And we can't even really call it an overdose, because 9 times out of 10 it's entirely unintentional, and they are taking something that they have no concept of what its limits might be or any familiarity with. And it's heartbreaking. I wish I could say, it's an isolated case with Weston and the Funder family. It's not. All across the country, you hear these stories and you'll see. I know Anne was actually at the signing of this bill on July 16th by the president, and just the profound sadness that comes over you when you see these parents of all, they come from all different places, all different states across the country, all different socioeconomic status. It's unbelievable that I really say fentanyl is an equal opportunity killer of our kids, killer of our young adults. I was even speaking to one of our constituents up in Warren County who shared with me that her brother was 73 years old and thought he was taking a recreational drug, and he also was killed by fentanyl. So it's unbelievable when you start talking about the issue and start raising awareness about it, just how many people in your own circle this affects.
Well, and then also, so many young people struggle with stress, anxiety, depression, mental illness. They may not be getting the support, the help they need. So, oh, well, here's something to take the edge off. What message do you have for families who might be concerned, or just message in general for people watching, what to look for, how to protect your family, how to protect your children?
Well, it really starts at home. I mean, that's the key of it all. Talk to your kids. Talk about what's happening. The scary part is that this drug trade consistently morphs into something else. And just when we have, a handle on some different strategies and ways to combat it, something else comes up. That the cartels and the dealers, the peddlers of this, are always trying to be one step ahead. And I think it's very important that parents are not afraid to have these types of conversations with their kids, with the understanding that, again, this is not a sip of alcohol, this is not a cigarette, this is not marijuana, this is lights out.
Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.